Okay, I'm going to try and keep this as short as I can. So, to summarise, would I recommend the HP Reverb G2 as an all-round daily driver VR headset? No, I wouldn't. Definitely not. Far too many compromises for a daily driver all-round use VR headset. Would I recommend it as a sim racing headset? Yes, I definitely would, with one small caveat that I'll get to a bit later. Yes, sim racing only, literally just for sim racing. Visuals are amazing, comfort is amazing, audio's good. Yeah, 100% best sim racing VR headset on the market right now, is my opinion. Day-to-day use, no, pants. So let's get into why it's no good as a daily driver VR headset. The first thing I want to talk about is, I think it's going to have to be the tracking, because this is the biggest ball ache. For any, sim racers don't care about controller tracking because we don't use controllers, so it doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant. But for anything else, especially like me, I play first-person shooters a fair bit, so we have trouble with getting too close to your face and it loses tracking. Controller occlusion, where you've got one in front of the other, it loses tracking. Even in things like Beat Saber, from time to time, you might rest your arms by your side for a second. You know, maybe like something I do in Beat Saber, I don't know why I do it, but let's say you've been doing some two-handed movements, striking those cubes, and then it just switches to one side. So you only need to use your right-hand saber, your blue saber. I rest my left-hand saber either behind my back, almost like I'm a samurai, you know, got one hand behind my back trying to look cool, or it's by my side. I don't know why I do it, I just do. Obviously, it loses tracking at that moment. Now, the Quest 2 would lose tracking in that scenario as well, but it's what happens when you bring the controller back into sight that makes a difference, and what happens whilst the tracking is lost. With the Quest 2, for example, the controller will stay in its last known position for the most part, whereas with these, they're more inclined to appear in front of your face or drift off somewhere. Now, this does still happen with the Quest 2. I have it in Half-Life Alyx. If it loses controller tracking, one will just appear in front of my face or it will drift off. But it happens a lot more with the G2 tracking. And that is annoying. Excuse me, I just got to close this window down that pops up. Yeah, that, because I've got a list of crap I need to talk about, because there's so much to talk about. I don't normally script things, and there isn't a script, but there's a list of crap I need to go through, so we're going to go through it. So yeah, that is annoying. And whilst you can improve the overall tracking experience by making sure you have what I want to call perfect lighting conditions in your room, in your play area. But the problem with this is not everyone can adjust the lighting in their room to get it just right. We shouldn't all have to jump through hoops to have a good experience with the tracking. It should pretty much just work, you know, bar it being pitch black or fully floodlit with sunlight. All the sort of conditions in between, so a little bit gloomy, you know, a little bit of sunlight, all those, you know, changing day-to-day conditions, they should all just work. And again, with other tracking setups, like the Oculus stuff, like the Index, even the old Vive, 95% of the time the tracking's just fine. It's only when you get to extreme lighting conditions that they don't. With these, it's the opposite. 5% of the time they'll work just out of the box. 95% of the time you have to make sure you've got that perfect sort of lighting conditions. I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe it isn't 95% of the time. But a lot of the time, you're going to have to adjust your lighting. And as consumers, we shouldn't have to jump through too many hoops to get something like this to work when there are better methods already tried and proven and tested out there from Oculus, from, you know, Valve Index, from Vive, for example, HTC. Shouldn't be the case. No need for it. So what else? So yeah, that's pretty much it with regards to the controller tracking. Now let's get on to the controllers themselves. I mean, other YouTubers like Sebastian Ang, I've referenced him before from MITV. He's demonstrated where these are working well, but he's probably got the lighting just right. You know, and if you've got the lighting just right, it is going to work better. But it doesn't stop occlusion. It doesn't stop it losing it when it gets close to your face. and it doesn't stop it losing it when it goes sort of out of that tracking field with the cameras. You know, lighting doesn't affect those things. And these still get lost more often than any of the other controllers I've tested. So, you know, it just isn't very good. So let's actually talk about these controllers themselves, shall we, being as we've been talking about tracking. I've got a long list here of things I need to mention, so I'm going to keep referencing my list, so apologies if I'm looking away every now and then. First thing I noticed when I got these out of the box and put them together and put the batteries in was that the battery cover is actually sharp around the edge here. Like it doesn't fit flush with the rest of the controller. And so when you're putting it in your hand, take it in and out, you can feel that sharp edge. This, you might think this is petty or a small detail, but it annoyed me and I noticed it straight away. You grab some other controllers and there's no sharp edges. It doesn't hurt you and it's not going to cut you open, but it's just indicative of fit and finish, quality, you know what I mean? You expect it to be a better fit. I don't know whether you'll see it on the camera or not. I don't know if I'm going to focus on it. Let's see if it does. But it just doesn't fit. No, it's not focusing very well. It just doesn't fit well around the edge there or around the side, you know. And as I say, you get this sharp edge that you can feel. So that isn't very good. They do feel a little plasticky and a touch on the cheap side compared to other controllers, I would say. The thumbsticks especially, whilst their resistance is quite good and they're smooth to move, the stick itself is too small and it's not rubberized. So not only is it small, it's hard plastic and slippery. And, you know, maybe you got, you know, natural oils on your hands. It just doesn't, they're just not good thumbsticks. They're small, they're a bit slippery, and they're not rubber, they're not grippy. So I don't like the thumbsticks either. And again, what HP could have done was look at the existing controllers out there, grab some Oculus controllers and just go, okay, those thumbsticks are nice. Let's make thumbsticks like that. It isn't hard to do, you know. They've copied the button layout, which is a good thing because it means if you're used to Oculus controllers, the buttons are in a familiar place. That's great. Why not just pay attention to the thumbstick? And all the reviews out there that go, yeah, Quest 2 controllers are nice. Yeah, CV1 controllers are nice. And use a similar size and material thumbstick. I don't know why they didn't do it, but they didn't. The buttons themselves, they're a touch stiff to press. They work just fine, no problem, but they're a touch stiff to press, which, you know, yeah, neither here nor there. Your Windows and your menu buttons, they are very fiddly little things to press. Again, you might not focus on these very well, but they're very small. One of them is raised, one of them is almost recessed, but not enough to really make much of a difference. Yes, you can feel the difference, but you find yourself just sliding around trying to find where they are in VR anyway, because they're really small. They could do with being a touch bigger, again, like on some of the existing controllers that we all know and love. So if you're going to copy something properly, you know, get it right. The tracking ring. Using visible light is pants, as we know. Mentioned the tracking a minute ago. The other issue is the tracking rings are big. When you're holding a weapon two-handed, when you're trying to reload a weapon, cock a weapon, I'm forever smashing the tracking rings against one another. And not only is that potentially damaging, it's hugely immersion breaking because it reminds you that you're not holding a pistol, a rifle, whatever it might be. It reminds you you're holding two cheap-ass controllers with big old tracking rings smashing against one another. And that is really annoying. I do not like it. Nothing can be done about it. It's the way it is. The trigger's okay. I have no real complaints about the trigger. That works just fine. The grip button, on the other hand, that I have complaints about. Now, on other controllers, say Oculus ones, the entire grip button pushes in when you squeeze it with your middle finger. Works just fine. This one is hinged at the front. So let me see if I can show you this. You see the back of the grip button here. If you were to push it at the back, it goes in quite nicely with very little resistance, no problem at all. Where you actually apply pressure is at the front here because your fingers are wrapped around it. And you can't, unless your fingers are 12 inches long, you can't put pressure on the end here, which is where you would need to apply pressure for this to not feel difficult. You're squeezing and you're applying pressure at the hinged end, which is only a couple of mil out of the handle. When you have something on a hinge, let's say a door, for example. None of us try and open a door in our house at the hinged end, do you? You grab the end with a handle on, and leverage is in your favour then. If you try and open or close a door at the hinged end, you've got to push it really hard to get that door to swing open. So this is exactly what's happening here with this controller. We're applying, because our fingers are curled round it, we're squeezing at the front where it's hinged. It just doesn't work well. The first thing Katie, my missus, said was, oh, this really makes my hand hurt a little bit. And I said, yes, I actually noticed exactly the same thing. Even after only a few minutes of use, not through fatigue, but because of how you have to squeeze it. You end up squeezing the whole controller with that middle finger just to get the grip button to push it. Now, I might be waffling on about this grip button, but it's annoying because it's a button I use all the time in first-person shooters. I like to have my first-person shooters configured so that when I release the grip button, it drops the weapon, and when I'm gripping it, I'm holding the weapon. I don't use auto grip because that is in no way realistic. In real life, if you let go of something, you drop it, right? So in virtual reality, if I let go of something, I want it to drop. So having to squeeze these constantly, it's almost like, I think after a while, you get that RSI feeling in your wrist if you've ever had that before in life. So the grip button's not good at all. I think that may be everything. Well, of course, there's the battery life issue. They take 2 AA batteries instead of 1. They last 8 to 10 hours instead of 30 to 40 hours. So twice as many batteries, they last a quarter of the time. Use different tracking. Come on, guys. There's no need for it. I suppose these wrist straps even are not the brightest choice in the world either. The little piece here that slides up and down really, really easily, as you can see by me flicking it up and down my finger. So if you actually let these hang from your wrists, maybe to adjust the headset or something a few times throughout play, they gradually work their way more and more undone. And then, of course, they're going to no longer do what you want them to do, which is stop the controllers flying out of your hand should you accidentally let go of them, you know, in a frantic game of whatever it might be, Beat Saber, or throwing a grenade perhaps, and you let go of the whole controller. If your wrist strap has already worked its way completely loose, because these are quite slippery, which is nice, but they could potentially slip off. Small detail, but again, when other people have already done it better, pay attention to what already works, in my opinion. So, I think that is probably, oh no, it isn't everything about the controllers. There's more to talk about. So the haptic feedback, and this is a big one. If anyone's ever accidentally bought or been handed a cheap Chinese mobile phone or a copy of an iPhone or a Galaxy S10 or S20 from eBay, you will know what a cheap haptic motor feels and sounds like. These sound like a cheap vibrator. Like someone's just gone down to Camden, gone to the market, bought themselves a $1.99 vibrator, and it does nothing but just bzz, bzz, bzz. Literally, you can hear the buzz. What you feel is next to nothing. It's almost, well, it is annoying actually. It feels like they're broken. It feels like something's wrong with them. They must have used the smallest haptic motors or haptic solenoids that money can buy. They're just terrible. I'd rather not have them on if I was to be using them. So yeah, that pretty much sums up the controller as a whole. You can tell I'm not a fan of it, can't you? Also, whilst it has a power off function, oh yeah, this was quite funny actually. They power off after a fixed period of time to save battery, just like all the other controllers do. That's great. What they don't do is power on by themselves. You have to press and hold, I think it's the Windows button, for like 5 seconds or something before it turns on. Now, this threw me when I first was setting up this headset, because like, the instructions that come with it just a piece of paper that say plug the cable in here, put the batteries in here, or something. Basically, they didn't tell you anything. They don't tell you that to turn the controllers on, you need to press and hold the Windows buttons for a period of time. They tell you to do that when you pair them. That's fine, no problem. But once all the setup is done, which is relatively straightforward, I might add, get your Windows mixed reality software in Steam, and you plug this into your Windows 10 PC, it should recognise it and it will prompt you what to do. So that's pretty good. Although for me, it actually didn't recognise it the first time round. It recognised it after a restart, and then it was plugged in, but it said it wasn't plugged in. So I unplugged it from the USB port, plugged it back in. That caused my computer to hard reset. So it wasn't the smoothest start, but eventually, once everything did work, it did work. And anyway, you do the pairing. But yeah, so to turn these on, I was there with my headset, and I'm picking up the controllers, just like you would with maybe Oculus ones, and I'm pressing all the buttons. I'm like, why are they not working? Because like they light up really bright, you know when they're on. I'm like, why are they not coming on? It's like I don't get it. I almost went to Google how you turn your G2 controllers on, and then I thought maybe I'll hold down the pairing button, because you wouldn't think holding down the pairing button is how you would turn them on. You would think you hold down the pairing button just to pair them, but you don't. You hold down the Windows button, which is what you use to pair, to also power them on and power them off. So that threw me a little bit. I would rather they were auto power on, but I guess, I don't know, for the same reason they're using, out of date tracking technology, maybe they haven't got power saving features that work well enough to enable them to auto power on, like the Oculus ones do, for example. So yes, the controllers are bad in every way. I'm trying to think if there's something I like about the controllers, but there isn't. So no, the controllers are just bad. The tracking is well below par, well below average. I spoke briefly about the software. Oh yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the software actually. So when you're playing around with VR and you're setting things up, you might want to go back and forward between your desktop computer usage and looking inside the headset. I would naturally put the headset on top of my head like this, and then grab my mouse and do what I need to do on the computer. Well, whilst you are in VR with the G2, it's probably not a G2 thing, it's probably a Windows mixed reality thing. Whilst you're in there, whilst it recognises that it's on your head, it locks out your keyboard and mouse for normal usage on the PC, which is really annoying. And it says on the screen, what does it say? It says press Windows and Y to be able to use the keyboard and mouse. It just didn't work. And I must have tried this 20 times over the course of testing. So, all right, Windows and Y. No, it doesn't work. It doesn't restore the keyboard and mouse, at least not for me. What you have to do is take it fully off your head and set it down somewhere, and then it releases the keyboard and mouse controls. Now that's just annoying. When you're flicking backward and forward, adjusting settings, maybe bringing up benchmarking tools, performance monitoring tools, you don't want to have to take it all the way off and set it down, or take it all the way off and hold it, and now you've only got one hand, so maybe you needed to type something. You can't do it. And again, you might say this is petty and I'm being picky, but these are all little things that I do, and they annoyed me because other headsets don't do it. If I'm using my Quest 2, I can quite happily rest it on my head, type away on the keyboard, maybe reply to a message, check a setting, look something up, change the performance overlay. There's no problem. With this, no, got to take it all the way off and put it down beside you, or hold it in one hand and then only have one hand left to play around with. So yeah, it was just little things that annoy me. So yeah, that's really the software. I mentioned before, when you transition between games and Steam VR, there's a lot of freezing and jerking and flickering. And someone in the comments said you get that with Steam anyway, and you do get that with Steam anyway. But I have found that I get it a little more so using this than I did using some of the Oculus headsets. So your mileage might vary with that, but for me, I noticeably get a bit more stuttering and hanging and flashing whilst it's loading either back into home or back into a game. And again, when you're in VR, you don't need this sort of stuff going on because it makes you feel ill. So that's a little bit irritating. Now, I've spoke before about the sort of power, GPU horsepower and CPU horsepower needed to run the Quest. And this G2 obviously is no different. It's still a very high resolution headset. I did a video explaining about the Steam VR slider, why 100% is what we should try and aim to use if we want as near to a native resolution rendering experience as possible, because it really does affect the clarity. So you guys already know, we need something pretty girthy to run it, so I won't go over that again. Let's talk about the actual visuals now, the lenses. So for me, the sweet spot, so where you have to sit it on your face to get it in focus, seems to be relatively small. It's definitely not as big as my old CV1 and probably not as big as my Quest 2 either, but this will vary depending on your face shape and the size of your head, because the closer you can get this to your face, the nearer your eyes are to the lenses, the bigger the sweet spot becomes. And the opposite happens obviously if you pull it further away, because the lenses are a fixed size. The closer they are, the bigger the focused area will be, and the further away, the smaller it shrinks to. So some of you may find the sweet spot large, whereas other people like me, we find it small. But yeah, that's my experience. It's small. The next thing is the overall clarity of the lenses. So the edge to edge clarity. So if you're looking at that, you're looking straight ahead, you got it in your sweet spot, you got it comfortable, and you move your eyes around. Maybe you're going to glance down and read some text at the bottom of a heads-up display, or maybe you want to look at a dial in a cockpit, in a car, or maybe in a plane if you're playing, a flight simulator, for example. What I'm going to call the off-center clarity, so anywhere but the center, the off-center clarity is not good. It is very, very blurry. More so than the Quest 2. And when I got a Quest 2, one of the things I noticed about it was the off-center clarity was nowhere near as clear as my CV1 was. So to then put on another headset and it be even worse was really a kick in the balls for me. Now again, if you can put it closer to your eyes, or if it naturally sits closer to your eyes because of your face shape, that area that is sharper will be larger than for other people. So your mileage will vary with this, comment as well. But for me, off-center, very, very blurry. Like as bad as the Rift S, for example, and the Rift S has terrible off-center clarity. I think also, because this is a high-resolution headset and it's so pin-sharp when it is in focus, it really highlights when the areas that are out of focus are out of focus. And also what affects this is, again, what resolution you can run it at. If you can't render it at the necessary resolution to keep it as pin sharp as possible, the areas that go blurry more so than if you were to render it at the highest possible resolution to get the maximum clarity. So for a lot of us that don't have 3090s, we're going to be running somewhere between 50 and 75% render resolution. It's only going to exaggerate that off-center blurriness. And of course the center clarity will be less sharp as well, but that isn't so bad. It will still be pretty sharp. But it's the off-center clarity that's really bad. Now, this is where I said for sim racers, it will be a good headset. And the one caveat is if you don't mind that off-center clarity being very blurry. For the most part, we look straight ahead when we're sim racing. So it'll probably be okay. If you're into flight sim, where you've got dials and gauges literally plastered everywhere, wall to wall, in the cockpit of whatever plane you might be playing, it's going to look like a blurry mess. And you're going to have to literally move your head around to look at every single dial and gauge to keep it in focus. Otherwise, no, just blurro vision. Again, unless it squishes to your face a lot more and that area gets bigger. So, for me, I did the strap up stupidly tight to squeeze it closer to my face, and I noticed an improvement. But it wasn't comfortable. I would never use it like that because it was just too much. Now, as far as the God rays go, I mentioned them briefly in my first impressions that they were pretty bad, and I would still say they're not great, but I wouldn't actually say they're any worse than on some of the other headsets, to be honest. I know the Valve Index had quite bad God rays, and Valve made these lenses, so maybe that's why we're seeing a similarity there. But I think what makes them exaggerated more on the G2 is because the contrast ratio is so good, as in the blacks are really black, the whites are really white. I think that exaggerates the God rays a little bit, versus on the Quest 2, which quite frankly looks like a washed out piece of crap compared to this, in the area that's in focus, I might add. on the Quest 2, the blacks are grey, you know, they're not black. And so the whites don't look as white by comparison. And I think because of that contrast ratio not being as good, the God rays don't look quite as bad. Whereas on this, where you've got bright white and then deep black, it definitely highlights those God rays more. So it's a byproduct, I think, of having a very good contrast ratio. And again, the colours on this are absolutely amazing. Like I say, it makes the Quest 2 look really washed out. It makes me want to get a Quest 2 and sort of adjust the brightness and the contrast and the colours as if I was setting up a monitor or a television. But of course you can't, so there's nothing you can do about it. But like I say, they are, I'll use the word amazing. The colours and the contrast ratio are amazing. You won't get any better that I've seen. And that is one real positive, as is the comfort. This is the single most comfortable headset I've ever put on. Again, my Mrs. Katie, she put it on, she goes, "Oh, I just want to sit here and wear it because it feels so nice." Didn't even have it on, it wasn't even plugged in. She goes, "I just want to wear it because it feels so good." So it really is super comfortable. I would prefer an adjustable knob on the back to wind it in and out. But again, if you're a sim racer, that might hit the headrest on your racing rig. So you might actually prefer it like this with Velcro straps instead. The audio is very good. It's not as good as a proper pair of headphones, obviously, on ear or over ear, because they still are quite small and they do sit off your ears a fair way. But compared to every other VR headset, the audio is very, very good, especially compared to Quest 2 and Rift S, which has terrible audio. So there are positives about this. Obviously, the IPD adjustment's a bonus, that works well. Oh, and light leakage. I get, and this is face shape dependent, I get no light leakage whatsoever. This is weird, actually. This facial interface, almost suction cup style to my face. It fits that well. And you don't realise, I think, how much light leakage, or I didn't, how much light leakage I was getting with the Quest 2 and the CV1 until you put on something that fits your face so well. It's just darkness in there. It's just black, especially when the screen is black, because it is genuinely black instead of grey. It's a whole different experience. So, you know, the nose guard or the nose bit that fits over there just works so well. So, you know, it's not all bad. And as I say, for sim racing, this is probably the best headset you can buy. And I would thoroughly recommend it if you don't mind that off-center blurriness, if you're not someone that looks around with your eyes too much. Let me just have a quick look at my list here. So yeah, we've been through the lenses. Oh yes, cable. The cable that runs to this, again, I mentioned this in my first impressions. It is a thick, heavy, stiff cable that is made of a sticky rubber substance. It is not a good cable, not at all. Fine for sim racing where you don't need to move around. For anything else, no. Too heavy, too stiff, too sticky, clings to your clothes, clings to your skin, clings to your hair. No, just not a good cable. Let's have a quick look. So we've been through the controllers, we've been through the tracking, we've been through the software. I've mentioned how it runs, been through the lenses, been through the cable. Just quickly to add in here, I forgot to comment on the field of view, and I stick by my first impressions video, which the field of view is very average. But again, this can be affected by your face shape. If you can get it to fit closer, you'll get a wider field of view. If you're someone that wears glasses and has to have it a little bit further away, your field of view is going to be narrower. But yeah, I forgot to mention that, so I've just slipped this little bit in here. Carry on. The only thing about, so yeah, I've been through no light leakage, blah, 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 that's all done. Yeah, the only thing I'll say negatively about the audio actually is that when you move the speakers ever so slightly from one position to the next, perhaps, they cut in and out. I've never had them finish in a position where the audio is cut off. It only does it when I'm actually moving them from one position to the other. But I thought it just worth a mention, you know, maybe that could be something that develops into a fault later on, you know, if you move them around a lot, I don't know. But just, you know, something I should point out as I'm trying my best to cover everything in this review. I think that's probably everything. If you have any questions, as always, stick them in the comments. But to summarise, daily driver VR headset? No, definitely not. Sim racing only headset? Yes, definitely, absolutely, 100% recommend it. And I think that is where we'll conclude my final review of the HP Reverb G2. Yeah, any questions, put them in the comments. Thank you all for watching, as always, and take it easy.